All right, I will call to order regular meeting of the ARPA Commission. Today is February 7, 2022 at 1:34 p.m. All right, the first order of business is appointment of a chairperson. I will mention for the record, we were waiting on two final appointments to the commission that were both made last Monday. So representing the Board of Finance is Christina Milos, and representing the Willington Parks and Rec Commission is Stuart Fisher. So Stuart's here in the room with us, for those who don't know Stuart, and Christina is on Zoom. So I would entertain a motion to appoint the chairperson. We had an informal discussion at our last meeting.
I'll move Christina.
All right, there's a motion to appoint Christina as chairperson. Is there a second? Seconded by Robin. Any discussion?
If anybody else wants to do it, I'm happy to let you.
Can't hear you, Christina.
Oh, it's not working.
Oh no. But I do want to mention, because I am the chair of CIP, I don't know if there's a feeling that that might be a conflict of interest. And if there is, I don't think I don't see a conflict, because they're, I think, pretty closely aligned. But if because I'm not I wouldn't be advocating for spending on anything that is related to anything other than the plan that we're trying to make. So that, I guess that's how I see it, but I totally understand if other people see it a different way. So just want to put that out there.
While I can see why the question may come up, CIP is merely an advisory committee to the Board of Selectmen. So even the decisions made on that plan are ultimately determined by the Board of Selectmen and then town meeting. And on this commission, Christina is the Board of Finance. So she's not speaking for any particular interest of the town as a whole. So I don't currently see the conflict of interest.
I'm in agreement with Erica.
Me too.
All right, any other discussion on Christina as chairperson? All right, seeing none, I will do a roll call vote. Robin?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Stuart Cobb?
Aye.
Stuart Fisher?
Aye.
Mike D'Amato?
Aye.
Troy?
Aye.
Samantha? You're muted, Samantha.
Aye.
Thank you. Jenny?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Christina?
I'll abstain.
I will happily turn this meeting over to our new chairperson. Thank you, Christina.
Oh, thanks, guys. Well, I actually don't have the agenda in front of me. What is it? Hold on.
Oh, no,
I had it up on my computer.
Appointment of recording secretary is next.
Okay. So
do the minutes. We didn't actually take a vote last time.
Right. So do we have any nominations for recording secretary?
I'll nominate Mike D'Amato.
I guess I should stop taking the minutes right now and
No.
I second that.
Okay, so we have a nomination and a second. I guess it's time to do a roll call, but I don't have the list of everybody, Erica, that you just had. Could you take over the calling of names for me until I get my act together?
Robin.
Aye.
Tom. Aye. Troy.
Aye.
Mike.
Abstain.
Stuart Fisher.
Aye.
Stuart Cobb.
Aye.
I vote aye. Jenny Arpin.
Aye.
Samantha.
Aye.
Christina.
Aye.
10 yes, 1 abstain.
Okay. Thank you, Mike, for your willingness. The next item is approval of minutes, and we have a set of minutes that everyone should have seen from our last meeting, which was on January 25th, I think. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I just wanted to say that there was a correction on the minutes, though.
Can I second them and then for discussion?
Okay. I didn't get who said it first.
Tom.
Tom, and then Erica seconded. Okay, so now we can discuss the minutes and any corrections to them. And Samantha, you had a correction?
Yeah, it's not a huge correction, but for the bi-weekly meetings, because I was really advocating for weekly meetings, I did abstain from that vote. So I just don't know how accurate. I mean, I'm not like, you know, crazy about it or anything like that, but I think we want to make them be as accurate as possible with the votes. So that was the only correction. Everything else I agreed with.
Okay. And anything else anybody wanted to mention? So can we vote on the approval of the minutes with the just the correction to the vote count on the one vote of the biweekly calendar? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Are there any abstentions?
Aye.
Okay, and any no's? Okay, so it passes. And Mike, I'm trusting that you know who said what there.
Yeah, I'm working on that.
Okay. All right, and then the approval of the meeting calendar. Is there a motion to approve the meeting calendar?
I know Kelsey was working on creating a calendar so that we could, you know, approve it specifically more than just every other date, but I don't see it included here.
Yeah, I don't think I saw it either. So we can table that and do it at the next one.
And Christine, I think some of the discussion was we said every other Monday. That would make our next meeting Monday the 21st, which is a holiday.
Oh.
And I think that's some of why she thought we should memorialize it and vote on an actual calendar.
Right.
That one, food for thought would be.
So in that case, and actually, like maybe just because I think there's a lot to talk about in the next like 2 months in particular, maybe we should have the next meeting either be on the 28th or the 14th rather than skipping the 21st.
I would agree.
I can't do the 14th, so I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, I don't think I could either, actually. I don't know. I have something else in the morning. But maybe the 21st, would that work for most people? I mean, I'm sorry, the 28th. Yeah.
Most of us are here.
So in your proposal, we will do the 28th and then we'll go back to the regular bi-weekly schedule and start again on the 7th and the 21st. Is that what you're proposing, Christina?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Would that work for everyone?
Yep. Works for me.
Yes.
Okay. So I guess I don't know that we need a motion to approve the calendar, but maybe a motion to approve just the next 3 meetings, which would be February 28th, March 14th, and March 28th.
No, I think it would be February 28th and March 7th.
Oh, that's right.
And then March 21st.
I'm looking at a.
So it would be 2 weeks off, 2 weeks on, and then revert to the every other week, from what I was understanding from what you said.
Yeah. Okay. So the 28th, the 7th, and the 21st. Right. Okay. Is that right for everyone? February 28th, March 7th, March 21st.
Time, same place.
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Is there any more discussion on it? And all right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Are there any nays? Any abstentions? Okay, so that passes. So we're now set on at least our next 3 meetings. And then the next item on our agenda is discussion of submission process and forms. And sure. So I did not receive any like suggestions of like exactly what should be on a form. We did get a email from Samantha earlier today with some suggestions of how to approach it and process and things to consider. And other than that, just I'm trusting everyone's been reading through the different materials that we have available to us to understand. And I don't know if Samantha, if you want to talk about what you recommended in your email, or if anyone else has any suggestions.
Copy of Samantha's email?
Pretty new, so.
It just came today. I'll make.
Yes, it did just come today, and I'm sorry for that. The weeks kind of creep up, but I just wanted to make the suggestion that a lot of the things that we were talking about last week, we're falling under pretty much the revenue loss category. And, you know, I think it's awesome that we have this commission in place, that we would still measure each of those requests, you know, for its value in terms of impact of COVID and going forward. But at the same time, it will expedite the process. You just take the money as revenue loss, but there's other categories that I think that we should consider first. That was really the gist of the email, that I think we should consider the category of responding to the public health emergency. I didn't know if we wanted to like discuss premium pay, water and sewer infrastructure, or broadband infrastructure, and rule those out, and then move forward with exactly how we would receive requests from agencies, simply because it just seems like the logical progression, because we can't go backwards. And then after taking the funding as a revenue loss, we can't go backwards and be like, oh, now we want to give premium pay to somebody. So that was really the gist of it. And sorry, I did get it out so late. It just, like I said, crept up on me. Thank you.
Is there anyone else with any comments?
I'd like to say something if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So for the people in person, I provided some paperwork. I've given a lot of thought to things that we could do with the ARPA funding that is not revenue loss, and that would fall under categories like assistance to households and in fact premium pay. I just basically wrote up a proposal with what it is, why we want it, the eligible use category, and then a monetary amount. I'm so sorry I don't have a virtual copy to provide to people who are not in person, but I did want to mention that I just kind of winged it, and that I'm along the same lines with Samantha and thinking that we need to explore, you know, what are the emergencies? What are the things we need to do right now besides revenue loss? So thank you for that.
Okay. Can you just tell us what some of the things are?
Sure. Each one goes into great depth, so I'll be brief.
Okay.
The first one is $2,000 for new computers at the senior center. The explanation of why is because the senior center computers, only one is working, and they all have Windows 7. And there's so many senior programs and things they need access to that they can't. They can't get onto the DMV website. They can't take the safe driving classes anymore. And that's a substantial issue for them because they count on that money being deducted from their insurance. So it's just a small amount, but that's one of them. $5,000, that's just a guesstimate of the price for an emergency generator for the senior center. And the reason why I think this is essential is because we've had a number of storms where we've lost power, and having the center available for warmth, cooling, running water, meals That would be very beneficial to all the folks we have in senior housing right now. We have 48 residents as of now. And additionally, having a generator available at the senior center would be very helpful and even life-saving to people who have medical equipment that require power. One of the things was the premium pay that I had discussed with the Board of Selectmen at a meeting. Erica, I don't remember what it was, last week or the week before?
Last week.
Yes, last week. And this covers a lot of what I've been doing as the Director of Human Services during the pandemic, as well as some monies for the assistant position to take over the administration and coordinating of senior programming, which at this point I'm doing on top of everything else. I have a shed for $3,000, and I just printed out something I found online. A shed would be really helpful because that way I would have access at the center to a lot of the essential products that I'm giving to clients now. Household needs have changed, and having a place right there at the center to store them and be able to distribute them would be very helpful. A veterans fund. So I've been wanting to do a fund exclusively for veterans. And the reason why I want to do it exclusively for veterans is, number one, veterans often have different issues and needs. And number two, I wanted to track the number of veterans we have in town that are seeking these services as a means of writing grants. And basically I'm asking for seed money. And I want to be able to track it and be able to get grants to further fund this fund. And then the last one, I'm so sorry, I'm going on too much, but the last one, I did a needs assessment of 106 of our residents, and I came up with a lot of what folks want. I developed a whole program. I attached all my charts and graphs because you know how I am. And this is for assistance to housing, housing repairs. That's the number one thing that I found that my residents need that I do not already have funds or other programs to cover. And it makes sense when you think about it. You know, funds are tight. You get food, you keep your lights on, you get clothes, you keep your car running, but your house, it has to, you know, take a back seat to all of that. So I'm open to any amount of money for that as well. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Hey, Christina.
Yeah.
It's Tom. You mind if I speak?
Okay. Yeah, no, please do.
I just wanted to share, we sort of talked about this at the last meeting. I'm kind of thinking, and I'll just throw it out there, like maybe a two-tiered approach, a fast track, and some that aren't as emergent, some things that are, everything's important, and I think we all agree with that. But in the areas I'm thinking of, fire and EMS, public works, the folks that are out there actually at the front lines of COVID that have been doing the heavy lifting. Again, everything's important, but just looking at the email that we got from the CIP, I mean, I'm kind of on board with that, with the email personally. And that's not an exclusive list at all, I'm sure. But I'm thinking, is there a way that we can try to take care of some of those more immediate, I don't know if that's the right word or not, needs or concerns, or go to the people that have been doing, I'm saying, heavy lifting, like the fire chiefs and specifically EMS. And again, public works is out there. So that's just kind of where I'm at. I wanted to throw that out there for discussion.
Well, thanks, Tom. I actually had a question for Erica because what came up, I guess, just in me writing that email, because we had a CIP meeting last week and we're trying to think like, okay, of all these things, what could possibly qualify for ARPA? And we need to know that like yesterday if we're going to put it in the plan. Otherwise, we need to make the plan different. And so I guess the way I understand it is that we would need to do like this commission could do some sort of provisional recommendation to the Board of Finance. And then later would be an actual recommendation. And then later would be an appropriation, but I'm not really sure. So I guess I wanted to hear from Erica, like what she sees as the process, because I don't know that this commission can actually just appropriate the funds. I think what we're actually going to be doing is making a recommendation, but I guess that's my question. It's a big question.
So this commission was put together and we would be responsible for allocating the funds. So the ordinance, and that's why we put the ordinance in place. And again, we mirrored our neighbors in Stafford, that these items would then not have to they'd have to go through the normal procurement steps, but not the appropriation steps. So we do not need to go Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, town meeting.
Okay, because I was talking with Donna and she thought that it would be only because it says to follow the well, it doesn't say the word appropriate anywhere in it. It just says manage the disbursement of funds, and that the commission will be the grant administrator.
I don't ask Christina. This is Robin.
Hi.
I said that, and it could be interpreted differently. I read it as the commission will be responsible for the appropriate use of funds. I'm sorry. Shall create internal local controls, shall document expenditures and be subject to audit, which I think was interpreted, if I'm not mistaken, under like how the town employees process appropriated funds. Erica, is that kind of, that sounds? So in other words, our budgets are approved by Board of Finance. So and this ordinance went to town meeting and was adopted to go forward. So in other words, to follow the way we spend our money, I guess, spend whatever that particular lump of funding is.
Correct. So it was written as such that to give the authority to manage the disbursement of funds from this commission. So town meeting gave that authority to this commission. So,
and that's what I thought from the meeting. I just wasn't sure with the way it was worded. And then when I asked Donna, so Donna, I guess we need to talk more just to understand. Like
that was the intent, and then that was a discussion with our attorneys as well when we, went over the language. And again, managing in a similar way in Stafford using the same language. So the intent was that this commission would be able to manage that process, which is another reason why, not just from the ARPA, the final rules aspect, but that it'd be important that we, have all of these meetings public, conversations with the town, conversations with the public, and make sure so many different areas were represented if we're making those decisions.
Right. Okay.
Item C does say that it will encourage, facilitate, and solicit input from the community. So I think, if that would entail another public hearing of some sort.
Yeah. No, I definitely think that we would need to do that. So I was just thinking and I'll put my CIP hat on in my request, what I put in the email as a request to this commission. And basically it's just, could the CIP committee, they're not a commission, have just provisional approval to sort of earmark those funds as being ARPA funds, because that plan will then go to the selectmen, then that plan will then go to the Board of Finance, then that plan will then go to the town meeting and eventually get voted on by the voters in May. So, and if we don't put it in the plan, I think what would happen is we would probably move out some other projects because we can't make the math work, or those projects would then come to, or in those departments would come to the ARPA Commission directly and ask for that, and even if we do put it in the plan, would probably need to come directly when the time comes to actually appropriate the funds, which I do think, like, before we appropriate any funds, we have to go through getting the 3 bids and making sure we know who the contractor will be, and all of those things that we do before we appropriate in other circumstances. But I don't know if that's what you're thinking, Erica.
We would hear a project, let's say, the one Jenny just gave us, and Jenny came to us and she wanted to put a generator at the senior center. And we determined, based on the process we set up, that yes, we think that is a project that falls under the rules and we're going to move forward with it. We could give it provisional acceptance, but then need to go through very specifics, right? So Jenny's saying I need $5,000, but then it would need a lot more information before we could say, yes, we're moving forward with that. And Jenny does some more research and finds out that it takes $10,000. And then we can, so that might start as, yes, we're going to move forward with this, but then we need to break down exactly what it's going to cost and see if it's still in that same ballpark is how I see it. And then go through the steps. We would have to say yes to it and then go through the procurement steps. Read the state contracted bid.
So can I just jump in?
Yeah.
Just to back up like a bit. So what we're discussing is that the CIP committee is essentially asking this commission to authorize or to endorse an expenditure of $473,000, which they're saying meets the criteria under ARPA. So they're saying spend the money through the ARPA and get it out of CIP. And they're asking us to make a decision on that fairly quickly so they can include it in their plan. Is that the long and short of it?
Yes, with one little clarification, because CIP really isn't a funding source in and of itself. It's really just a list of projects and a list of possible ways to fund them. So we have probably 10 different funding sources that we used, and we try, it's like a puzzle that we try to put together of, okay, we have $50,000 here. What could we use this $50,000 for? Oh, it matches up with this project. We'll put it here, and then hope it all works out. And then we have to go through it in many iterations, and then we have our plan. And it's a 5-year plan. so yeah, that's the only clarification. So it's
the only thing that I'm sort of like trying to figure out, almost like a chicken and the egg, is that if they put that in now and we get to this point down the road where, I mean, that money can't be spent unless this commission approves the dollars, even if the board of the Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen say that sounds great. If this commission allocates it differently, we could get into this. I don't know. Is there like a little bit of a?
To me, Mike, they want to take that out of CIP. That's the way I would look at it. But these expenditures are basically, they're saying, can we fund it through ARPA and not through the process, the CIP? I mean, that's the way I look at it, Christina.
Right.
Yeah. Although it would stay in the plan until it's actually appropriated. So
that I think because I sit on CIP too, I don't know that I see that we could really put it on the CIP plan, because that goes through a different process. So I think bringing the items here and letting us talk about them may leave them on our plan a little bit longer. And from the CIP perspective, Christina's saying they don't want to take them off the plan if ARPA isn't going to fund them. They want to find another way. So maybe what we do is go through those items and let's talk about those first and see if we think yes. And saying yes today doesn't mean we're going to go spend the money tomorrow or at our next meeting, because then we have to look at the specifics of the project and what it will, what a final cost will be.
Samantha's got her hand up, her virtual and her real hand. I see it now.
Yes, well, I have my virtual hand up for a while, so I know that I usually have a lot to say. So I was trying to, you know, write it all down and get it out of the way in that way. But I have a couple of things. One of them is to going back to clarify something that Jenny was talking about, which is, so I had been raising my hand for a while. She had mentioned some other amounts, which I thought the figures were worth looking at. She gave us amounts for the senior center computer, emergency generator, and the shed, but we didn't get the amount you were requesting for premium pay, and we didn't get the amount for the veterans fund. And I know you said for needs assessment, any amount. So if we could, so I just want to mark that off because I wrote that down. And I think it's really important. And I am on the side of getting money to, as I mentioned in the email, to homes and businesses first. And to me, all of these other things can fall under the category of revenue loss. And that's why I'm not really sure, as we discuss this possible allowance for the CIP to earmark, you know, funds for these projects. Technically, from my understanding, any of the projects could be funded through the revenue loss category, which is one of the 5 categories. The things that we choose as a committee to fund are our option. They don't even, once you take it as revenue loss, there's no compliance. We do not have to answer to the grantor. We don't have to go to them and say, hey, we did it for these things and this is how it impacted COVID. You're just taking it as a blanket funding as revenue loss, and then we're allowed to decide how to spend it. Now, as a committee, of course, I think that or a commission, I think that we should try to spend it in ways that were impacted by COVID, because we do have to answer the public. But I'm saying, technically, I don't see why we're doing that now. Not trying to, you know, I feel like that is, I mean, and that is one urgent, or you're feeling that that's urgent with the timeline. And I feel like my items that I've brought up are people and business are urgent with a timeline. And so we had someone who brought up, could we have a fast track? And I think that when I missed your name, I'm sorry. He was saying, well, he felt that some of the emergency needs for, you know, fire department and our emergency responders were, you know, key and most important. Some of those on your thing, I felt like they were as well. But again, I feel like we need to just sit like a tier, you know, like a flow chart of how we would possibly make those decisions about which items, because we're already in some type of quandary, not necessarily disagreement, but we all have an angle or like a perspective on what items would be fast track items. So I feel like the first thing to do is to sort of set an overarching, you know, rule or whatever about what items would be fast track and or what the process should be, which is why in my memo I suggested we have these 5 categories. Maybe we should preliminarily just allocate a fifth to each one and then work from there and take from this budget and put to that one if we decide not to do that, because it seems like a logical progression. Thank you.
So Christina, I have a couple of points. Samantha, if you read, oh, and you don't have it yet, so I apologize. We'll get electronic copies to the rest of you of Jenny's proposals. She did have dollar amounts in for the premium pay. So the discussion was that is something we would eventually, the town would then need to absorb, right? So if we start giving an increase to someone with these dollars, you're not going to take it away in a budget. So to ease it into the operating budget, the discussion was a quarter in the operating budget this year and 3/4 in ARPA. Next year, potentially half and half, so that the operating budget is sustainable, right? So what we don't want to do with ARPA is put it to things that are going to cause us another $1.7 million in spending year over year. So there's a plan for that. I too have questions about the funds, but I assume Jenny will talk to us about those when we start asking her. But as far as what is fast tracked, I agree with you, but I see a couple of things being fast tracked. And the selectmen were pretty open about our small businesses, our individual households, and what kind of assistance we thought they needed, and those EMS responses to COVID. So there are some of those in there that I think are really, really important. While I think giving to our businesses and setting that up is just as important in a response to COVID as making sure that our emergency services and first responders have what they need. For instance, the radios, and making sure they have adequate ways to communicate around town and the new radios will do that so that when there is a COVID-like emergency. So I see those, a couple of those items from the CIP list being just as important to fast track as I know what economic development is working on for a business opportunity and whatever we might decide for households. But if we go back to Samantha's email, I think it is important for us to decide how we want to allocate dollars. Do we want to, you know, I think not everything can be revenue loss. It's only things that we would typically spend on for a municipality. So we wouldn't normally give grants or those things. So most of what we do could be in the revenue loss category. I think it's probably easier for us to move out of that than into that. And then there is we do have to justify, not to the extent that we would in some of these other categories in the reporting process. So there is a lot of work on the reporting end, but if we take it as a revenue loss, it really streamlines the reporting because you took it as a municipal or government service. So that's easy, but I just want to clarify that we are going to have to justify, just not nearly in as much detail, or have to say that it goes to a COVID impact. So our revenue loss does not have to be related directly to COVID.
I just have a question in that. I don't want to come across as grumpy, but maybe it's just because I'm trying to figure out a way that makes sense to me as not being an emergency responder or this or that. I feel like I still feel like we're a little bit of cart before the horse, because we're talking about all these individual requests that people, you know, we have this much request and we have this much money. We're inherently going to have to make people unhappy. And we can agree that certain things like public safety or this or that are really important. I cannot get past the fact that we are basically talking about dollars before we even have any idea what the committee as a whole feels as far as how we should spend it. And I don't want to get into a point down the road where we identify this great project that we all want and we're like short. And if our meeting is a couple of weeks away, I'm just thinking, how much time is it really going to take for us to get that list together to basically say, this is the request, this is who it's from, this is the amount, so that we can just look at it and see where we are. Because if we're already at $6 million, I don't know how much we want to ask for more money or more projects, right? Because we're already going to have to cut this down by, I can't get past, I don't know how I get comfortable with saying, yeah, let's spend money on this when I don't know what's about to walk through the door. It just feels like I don't want to take that risk. And while I agree that a lot of this stuff is very important, I don't know what will come up. How hard would it be to fire drill a list together that just very quickly says, this is the amount, this is where it's coming from? I'd be happy to help put it together if we have it.
I don't think we have it yet. That's the thing. we don't know yet what these requests are.
Right. So Jenny brought us some things. CIP had some things. I'm sure the fire department, but we haven't solicited actual items from everyone. And I think that's why we don't have a list. But I know that EDC has been working on things for small businesses. I think, to me, what we give to them, and if we were to do specific grants or cash amounts to households, if we just pick a dollar amount now and say that, and I think EDC may have some recommendations. Between Mike and Samantha, you all talked about it. Like, you envisioned $1 million going to businesses, and I
300,000.
Just made up that number. But then we could
look
at
18%,
and put that as, and then take the projects we have and make them actual items on our next agenda, to start talking about some of the things that we're talking about fast tracking. What's it going to be for a radio project, and talk about them as individual projects. And do we think, yes, we can do that? But if we take those things that don't fall under revenue loss and put it out on the table now, we'll know what we're talking, what kind of real dollars we're looking at.
Yeah, because we have 3 weeks till the next meeting, right? So there's some time to pull together some of that stuff and get a list that we can actually start like looking at for dollars and projects.
So I have something to say, if that's all right. Mm-hmm. First of all, this is addressing the issue of fast tracking. I'm wondering if it might be a good idea to come up with some kind of scoring system for all of the proposals as they come in. I'd be happy to do that if you guys think that's a good idea. If anybody wants to do it with me or doesn't want me to, whatever, it's fine. But I think a scoring system might be a good way. We could have criteria in there, something like, you know, is there any other funding available for this project? You know, who is it serving? Is it serving our most vulnerable people, et cetera? And on that vein, I'd like to say, And this is directly to Mike, basically as to explain why I come in with all these papers. It's because I'm advocating for folks that are our most vulnerable population, and that's what this money is for. And so there has not been an opportunity to do a lot of these things through the town because our finances are very constrained. So this is a huge opportunity to help our people in town, to help our seniors. That's 20% of our population. So here I am bringing this to you because I think that this is a great opportunity to help people in a way that we never thought we'd be able to do before.
Robin has.
I have a question. Robin Campbell. One of the factors in here is the water and sewer infrastructure. Since I've been working here in 2009, there has been discussions about, you know, the trying to grow the EDC with the businesses and stuff. This is one of the things here that they're going to give us money for that is like a no-brainer, no question. I mean, I don't know if the EDC is like discussing anything like trying to like water. I don't know how much it would cost, but is that?
Yes, we have discussed it.
Okay.
A lot.
Yeah, I mean, that is like a huge advantage that we could use towards that, you know. I don't know, and I'm not saying use all the money towards it, but it's very important, I think.
And
Tom has
just one other quick point. You're absolutely right. One of the thought that I have in my head is also things that are when this is done, what are going to incur more burden on the taxpayer because we've started something new. Not saying anything's we shouldn't, but that's, you know, this money is just here for a short time and it'll be gone. And so that's just want to throw that out there.
And if you look at the final rule, and I know over the many discussions I've had over the interim and now the final over the last year, it's been, you want to look at ways to utilize this money without incurring costs year over year. So water and sewer is something that falls into that, broadband falls into that. But it's why I have some questions about some of Jenny's funds. That's great if we give it seed money, how is it going to be? Are we putting a new burden on a budget to fund these things later? And I'm sure Jenny's thought about that. But those are what I think we have to think about. But there are, I think to me, there's some no-brainer things we need to absolutely be having very specific discussions on. And that's grants to small businesses and a couple of these first responder items that have come before us. And I think we should, while we're talking about an overall bigger picture, I think we could talk specifically about a couple of items. I have some requests that I haven't made for the Board of Selectmen side, but I don't think they're as emergent as making sure we can use these funds to put back into the hands of businesses so they can still stay open in Wilmington. They play into our tax base. They, you know, employ people, and that there's a cycle there. So I think that's really important. And so some other things aren't necessarily as dire. Jenny's put forth a lot of great things, but I don't think they're all things that have to be fast tracked immediately. Some of them, yes, not all of them. So while we compile that list, I would like to see us talk about some very specific projects. And specifically, you know, again, I'll put my head out there for the emergency response items and EDC's grants program, which we haven't seen a formal concept of, but Samantha and Mike can talk to us. Samantha just gave a dollar amount. They have a dollar amount in mind of what they think it can do. So that's my 2 cents.
Can we work towards?
Yeah.
And Samantha, can you speak to what the actual program is? Like, because part of this is too, like, oh, it sounds good, but we don't actually have a thing to say yes to yet. And when we do, how long will it take for it to actually happen? Because you have to price out everything and basically get it ready to go. And with our following our rules, we have to get bids and all of that before we could say yes to it. So
are you talking about the sewer project?
I'm talking about any project.
Well, for the mini grants, I consulted our chairperson and he suggested an amount. He asked me to request on our behalf, 300,000. which would be 60 mini grants of $5,000 to Wellington businesses who would have to follow a similar procedure to the type of requests or the type of proposal I made for a request at the end of my memo. So they would have to display or demonstrate to us that they had COVID impacts that negatively impacted their revenue. And how they would use this money. Basically, they'll keep it fairly simplified so that we could get the money into their hands so that the forward motion, you know, things that like Eric was mentioning about, you know, them continuing their business. I mean, $5,000 could mean a difference of them shutting down in 2 months and us losing all of their tax revenue and whatnot, you know, so it's certain situations we feel the sewer could be something down the road that was continued to be discussed. I didn't think we really brought that up, but it was if we had any other interest as a commission in any of these funds, it would be because of wanting to draw other businesses and having the capacity to, you know, to handle them and their waste. That's not my area, so I don't know as much about that. But I also just really wanted to speak to Mike's point. I agree with Mike, who had mentioned it's really hard to say, yeah, I'm going to give 40% of this money away, you know, off the bat to things that we think are important without knowing what else is down the line. And I understand that. I do think that we could make some general estimates of, okay, let's spend 20% on this amount and like so-and-so. And that's where I'm coming from. The 300,000 is 18% of the overall funding. So I guess it's up to us as a commission to decide, are these businesses worth 20% in general? You know, like we could look at it from that point of view. And I would like to just say that the figures I did get from Jenny for Human Services, 2,000, 5,000, and 3,000. I did those add up to $10,000, which is 0.5. Okay, it's 0.5% of our money. And I just feel, especially for the senior center computers, if we can't say, oh yeah, we'll give you 0.01% so that they can function, because nowadays even aging and disability services through the state of Connecticut is online. They need those things just for like lifestyle. So I feel like we should be able to, we don't want to like live in fear of, oh my God, we might make a mistake and appropriate 0.5% of the money the wrong way. So I feel like, you know, stepping forward is important with some of the things. And it sounds like I'm in agreement with Erica about let's decide which amounts we're going to not take as revenue loss, or like earmark something just in case we can't. And then just seems the discussions that we're having a lot are under the other category. But I also agree with the one of the items that you had on CIP. It seemed like, you know, it's an emergency item that seemed very relevant and timely. And one more comment, when Jenny was talking about creating a scale, see, I feel like the more administration and the more scales and the more measuring we do is just, then we get into, is this a real accurate measurement? I feel like that creates more administration in some ways and could end up being more cumbersome to forward motion, just as a critique. Not that I hate the idea entirely, but I don't know if we have the luxury of that much time with certain things. Thank you.
This is a question for Erica and Samantha. What if we were to approve the $300,000 for the small businesses today, or 3 weeks from now, or a month from now, whenever it is? How would those funds get dispersed? Would the EDC decide, and the checks would come from the town of Wellington, or would like who signs off on it all, basically?
So I would see, so East Windsor, and Mike is pretty familiar with this as he works in East Windsor. Is yours modeled similar to their program? Okay, he's shaking his head yes, which is great, because they did an amazing project immediately in East Windsor. And Jason Bauza, their first selectman, was able to talk about it at the CC convention, which was most helpful. And Mike, it looks like he might be sharing. So first I'd see, Christina, we'd have to have a proposal from me to the project, which Mike might have. And I think then we could discuss it. And in that, those details might be exactly how it will be paid out. So that's the first thing. And then I say, yes, if we know how it's going to, you want to screen share? If we know how it's going to be done, then I don't see why we wouldn't say, yes, we're going to move forward with this mini grant program. But once we see a proposal, we as individual committee members may have questions. I have questions of, is this small business? Do we have a couple of large businesses in town? Does this mean, something like a FedEx would qualify for, and their proposal might actually speak to those things.
So this is what was approved by the Economic Development Commission a long, long time ago at this point, which outlines the program, the purpose. It includes specific eligibility for small businesses and nonprofits, and that they demonstrate that they actually meet those requirements. It then includes the application requirements, which is the documentation that Sam outlined, and specific details related to the use of funds, negative impacts, et cetera. Talks about how the town reserves the right to revisit the application for auditing purposes, lists the grant amount, and that it would be funded based on availability, et cetera. So the idea here is not to just hand it out to everybody. And yes, this was modeled based on the East Windsor program. But this was already kind of vetted by the EDC, and they looked at everything, and we have an application form that we've basically written. So we already know that the grants would be limited to $15,000, and we're not just going to be giving it to organizations that have a location in Wilmington. They have to be a business in Wilmington. So someone like FedEx would not be eligible, for example.
I have a question. Do we really have 60 small businesses that would?
Well, it's just that if we can fund up to 60. If we did 60 businesses at the amount that's specified, so we did look at the business list, and I don't know what the eligibility would be. And frankly, East Windsor found it very hard to hand out that money because people just didn't want to fill out any of the information. They didn't think it was real. They thought there was money attached. The first selectman basically had to pound on business doors to say, please submit this application. So I don't know that we're going to be able to hand out 60, but we wanted some flexibility based on the size of the business. If you're one business and you have one employee, $15,000 might be different than another business that has multiple locations or whatever.
Are there guidelines on what they need to spend the money on? Or are they taking a vacation to Florida?
So there are specifics as far as that they need to provide to us how they'll use the money. So if they say to us they're going to use it for X, Y, and Z, and then there's a concern that they didn't, then we can follow up and make sure that they spent it on that. But they have to tell us, details on how the pandemic public health emergency negatively impacted the business, how they're going to use the funds, how it will address the negative impacts, how it will be used to add value, quality, desirability, attractiveness, or competitiveness to the organization or business, and how the funds will allow business or organizations to become more resilient in the future. So that's required as part of the application.
Add something at the end, like after the money's spent, maybe supporting documentation of how the money was spent. Just so, I mean,
because on a reporting basis, we're responsible for, because this would be used under the first category, which is without a doubt the most complicated, will require the most amount of work in the reporting area, and making sure that it's used appropriately, because then we are responsible for how they utilize that money. So I would say, to Robin's point, probably yes.
Christina?
Okay, well, I'll bring that up tomorrow. We have a EDC meeting tomorrow, so I'll bring those points back to the commission and come back to you with any discussion and further information.
Thank you, Samantha.
Madam Chair?
Yes, I can't tell who that is. Is it Tom? Okay.
On our agenda, we don't have a present to speak, and I wanted to throw that out there. I know Alex Moore is here today, and we've got some folks online. I don't know what the procedure for that is. Like, should we add a present to speak to the future agendas, or
We probably should.
people want to come and spout off, or just have input? And Alex, the
only thing I had was the ambulance, the used ambulance that we had been talking about between Board Finance and CIP.
Do you think some money should be used, or is that what you're?
Yes,
for
his request. Yes, because nothing's formally come out as to how.
So that would be a request that you would make
Yes.
when we solicit.
And that's one of the questions I have as a follow-up is, Christina, how do we want to ask for like a formal solicitation? Are we taking it, like Jenny's given us some things, the fire department did not, and I think I hear Alex saying, because there's been no mechanism by which to request. Right. EDC hasn't formally requested, although I know they're ready to go with a request. So I think that's the first thing we should handle it, you know, is how do we want to do that? Is it a simple communication to groups? And then we can start to get in requests as we talk about some of these, I think, fast track items that we want to touch on. I would like to see them individually listed on our next agenda, like, you know, discussion and possible action of senior center. Look at the top one, senior center computers. Discussion and possible action on, you know, EMS ... on EDC grant program. And then we can talk about those while we still talk about a broader view. And Mike, maybe you can, and Troy can chime in. I think water, bringing water to anywhere other than where we currently have it to most serve to our businesses would be well outside of our $1.7 million.
Yeah, absolutely.
We could use that as seed money, but I don't think that would get us very far, unfortunately.
And without a location to bring that to, you don't know what the cost would be.
That is correct. But the bulk of our businesses are pretty far from Old Farms Road and in the Hall School area where they are. So it would be traveling quite a ways to extend what we currently have. While I think it would be beneficial to those businesses, we'd be putting in a little bit of money and have to find a boatload somewhere else. There are some projects that without a doubt could eat up this money in about 2 seconds. So my 2 cents on that. I think it's important. It's all right. I think broadband infrastructure, but Willington didn't get the kind of money at Hartford and Waterbury are getting, and we have the most rural needs with those things.
So what I think I'm hearing is that we do need to send out just a very simple communication to every department head and every group in town, and maybe as a public notice as well, as a Facebook post, all the ways. And maybe if we can all just brainstorm 5 things that we want to make sure are included on every submission. And I think we've heard a couple of things, but my notes are all over the place. I'm just looking for where I put that. One was well, Samantha, you had the list. Somebody was reading off a list. It was either you or
I don't know if I have a list, but I had written something down.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to say that I do think we have made a decision as a commission, which is that we are not going to fund 2 of the 5 categories. So I'm excited about that, which includes the broadband and the water and sewer. So that is our first major decision. Now we have 3 categories left. Anyway, no, I think that just impacting, they should make a note of what the proposal is, how they were impacted by COVID. I mean, those are some questions that could be answered, how they'll use the money going forward. Actually, I think that it was Mike who had brought them up for small businesses, but really they apply to any project. So he had a nice bulleted list.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we should accept those preliminarily, you know, just that's how we should present it. I do not think we should make a formal request, but we should just say that we have a preliminary form as we're working out the kinks on the information that we request the right to get more information, that way at least we can be discussing things.
Yeah, and then as they come in, we can like I can start a spreadsheet of all this to try to track it. And I mean, maybe the problem we're going to have is we don't have enough projects to spend the 1.8 million on. At least.
Don't worry. But the things that are on the table and a couple more, I think we could easily take care of that.
I've been like listening to everything that people have been saying, and though we haven't talked about how we're going to track it, I've been sort of building an application form in our system. And so the things that we've discussed or that I've included are basically who's submitting the request. Obviously, we want to know that. And is it coming from an entity like a staff person? Is it coming from a commission, et cetera? who's going to manage the request? So it's easy enough to say we want to install a water line, but who in Wellington is going to manage that massive project? I've included a project categories list, which basically gets back to the various drop downs that we've talked about as far as whether it's going to be economic development or whatever, which is coming from the guidance documents. A project description, a request amount, if there has been another funding source that's identified for the project, and then asking them if there are any ongoing operational expenses that the town would need to absorb on a long-term basis. So those are the things that I think we've talked about to this point.
Can I add in there an important one, that it meets the criteria of the final rule? And that, you know, some of these projects, they may be able to bring to us a lot more prepared, that they have 3 quotes if available, or a state contracted vendor. I would encourage us to ask for some contingency, potentially 5% to some of these other projects, so that we aren't cut short, especially with the cost of things. And to Mike's point, a liaison from the group that will be, that reports the expenses monthly, and then how we are deciding. And my proposal would be that this commission votes by majority to accept or reject a project. And I guess the only other thing would discuss if the chairperson, I would say that the chairperson then couldn't cause a tie. We have an odd number of people, but if somebody's not here in a meeting, it could be an even number that the chairperson can't cause a tie, but they could vote to break a tie. Those are my suggestions.
And then maybe an email, if it's going to go out, email just a link to the qualifications, yeah, so people can reference that when they're.
And we are working on setting up a separate area on the website, and so it may just link back to that, have those documents or links live on that page.
Another thing we could ask is if this project has been ever requested in the past, because like some things like Jenny mentioned as a generator at Senior Center, we've heard that request before for CIP, and it hasn't been funded, but it was a lot more than $5,000. But it definitely is something that the town has talked about doing before. So it's not like something that's just come up, somebody just thought of. So, and I think that would weigh into our decision making if it's something if we're solving a problem we've had for even longer than COVID, all the better.
And Christine, I think what we've seen in some other towns is that they are taking a much broader look at the bigger budget, but they move very quickly on some items. And some of those are the items that we're talking about, to Tom's point, and Samantha and Jenny, that there are some things that just need to be done now, because we really need to help these people now, and then look at a slowed down view of, I'm sure Troy has $1.7 million in one project he could offer up to us without a doubt. So I think there are lots of other projects, but not so time sensitive, that hits at exactly why these funds were out there. So I think we're moving on the right track. I know I did share with that we took a lot of the language from Stafford. We reached out to them, Christina, I think Kelsey shared with you. They still don't have an exact how we're determining projects in place. So they didn't have anything concrete to offer us, so that we could just borrow their wheel.
But they have appropriated funds already?
They have. In their first meeting, they appropriated some funds. And for some of the very things that we're talking about, EMS, police related, I don't know, and Jenny, you may be more familiar living in Stafford, Alex left, if they've already appropriated funds for businesses or anything like that.
I don't know off the top of my head.
I know, like I said, East Windsor is the one I'm most familiar with. And while it wasn't super easy, it was successful. But it took a lot of work on their part, but I think they've ironed out some kinks, so we may be able to learn from that. But those are things that I think we could move on while we, slow walk some of the others and have some real solid conversation about whether or not this is the best use of our funds. Stuart is here from Parks and Rec. One of the big things is if we go into a pandemic like this again, being outside was important for people when they couldn't gather inside. What kind of investment, one-time investments we want to put into our parks program that could be beneficial? but not something that has to be done today, because it might mean the difference between a business staying afloat or somebody receiving a medical service from us. So
I have a question.
Yeah.
Stu Fisher, Parks and Rec. I don't think we've met. Process. I think Parks and Rec has some requests in there. And in speaking with the board and with Alan, they'd like to reconsider that. So I don't know if that's automatically put into the ARP request, because we want to review that and put in a different submittal than CIP. If it's the intention of the town to take CIP and move it and fund it all with ARP money, then we'd like to be aware of what those considerations are and make sure that our submittals are in line with not being conflicted.
Well, Stuart, so I can tell you, just because I was just looking at it, Parks and Rec put in for year one, the cover, the pavilion over the outdoor workout area. That was in year one project. And then I think in year 4 or 5 was lighting on the track and those on the walking track. And those were the only 2 submissions that CIP has received for this year.
Okay.
So
I thought there was a broadband submittal.
no.
Internet or something like that.
No, so there's like bigger conversation. I've had conversations with Alan about, and that's something that I would bring to you, is not, I don't think it falls under the broadband category, but it's kind of loose, is how we can increase Wi-Fi in around our public buildings and in our park. So that's really important. So that Alan and I have worked on that.
But it's not part of the CIP.
It isn't currently.
Okay, so thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, to me, that was right for ARP, so I didn't submit that somewhere else. I think that's, a great use of these funds, but we didn't actually ask for submission, so I didn't give you anything.
All right, good, thanks.
Was the,
well, I guess we didn't answer the question, excuse me. So the pavilion's being moved over to ARP money.
well, not necessarily. The CIP thought, well, this particular project is better than some of the other projects for these funds, and put it there temporarily. But if this commission doesn't want to fund that for whatever reason, then we would either need to find another funding source for it, or move it out a couple years, or just say no to it outright, which is what we do to a lot of projects. So,
most years, and if I may, Christina, CIP was the only other funding source for these large projects. So this year we had so many, and instead of, we were trying to find the best way to get everything that we could in year one of the request, and the way to keep some of them in the plan and get them done now was to say, this is a good use of ARP funds, let's suggest this to ARP, instead of pushing them out to year 2 or 3 and something not getting done that really would benefit our residents, because we just don't have enough money on that end without asking for a considerable increase from taxpayers. And since we have this one-time fund, that's a great use for some of these things. I think that's where it came from, moving it here so that we can do the most with what little money we do have.
Sure.
mm-hmm.
So this is an immediate need for allocation of funds. The capital expenditure process will ensue in a couple more years from now.
It's a 5-year plan.
And it's still in place?
Yeah. So the idea is you put something in and then it work its way to year 1, but even then, sometimes things get bumped because there's something with a more of immediate need and a limited pot of money, again, without going to taxpayers and asking for a significant increase. But this is a way to keep some of those things done, because they actually speak to what ARPA was for. Like, boy, if we had a lot more things to offer in parks when we were quarantined the first time, it would have been fantastic. So I think Parks and Rec probably has some suggestions. While it's too late to suggest for this year to CIP, I don't think, based on our discussion, it'll be too late to recommend them for ARP funds.
Right.
So the pavilion's not a done deal. We have some discretion to resubmit our requests.
Well, I mean, you need to tell the CIP committee because they are very close to being done with the plan, and that's in the plan. But
I asked to bring that up today.
Like you think it needs to be done, or you want to take it off and put something else you think is more important in?
The preliminary thoughts are to take it out, put something else in, but I'm not here to announce that today. I'm just asking, my first meeting.
Right, and so CIP can only deal with what we know and what people have submitted. So that's all that we're dealing with. So, unless another request, and we're trying to hold firm to the, no late submissions rule, because otherwise we can't function. So,
but a late,
yeah, taking it out after the fact that's very easy to do.
I'm not saying you do that.
Yeah.
But if you're saying you think it could be held off in CIP, you could leave it in the CIP plan, and then what that committee would do would be to push it off a couple of years and not make it something we're trying to get done in year one. That's where the difference is. Like, you want to leave it on the plan, but it's no longer not your most important item.
Clarify.
Yeah, I think that would.
I'll have more information next meeting on that as we go down the road.
Yeah, all of us will.
Yeah.
All right, so Mike D'Amato, are you okay with, it sounds like you've made progress on this online form, and it sounds like would it be ready enough to, like, if Erica were to send out an email to all the places, she could put a link to that and people could start filling it out?
Yeah, I mean, as long as we're comfortable that we have everything that they're going to want to use. I mean, any of the town hall folks that are already in the system, other than that, you just need an email address. The one thing that I had mentioned to Donna was that if there's specific things we want to track related to reporting long-term, that if we know those up front and we capture that, it'll be easier to report out later. So if she has any of that information, we can include it. But
yeah,
I mean, it's going to require. It's going to require an extra step, because you're going to have to go online, you're going to have to submit an application, but it's going to give it a number, which we can then track the request. It's going to, there will be some benefits as far as they can attach documents. I'm just trying to think of long-term, these projects are going to exist for a while.
Right.
So it makes no difference to me, it's already done, but.
And that may not be everything, right? That's going to capture some things, and they're going to bring us a description, and we may say, well, we need a lot more information from you before we can decide. I've been following what staff are doing since they started this, and they have some projects that they just said, we need a lot more. And so they're still talking about them while they've moved on others, and making sure they have, really thought it out. So that form gets them started and gets it in the world of yes, or guys, you thought this, fit into the ARPA category, and it really doesn't at all. And for us to be able to say those things.
Okay. Well, Mike, I don't mind working with you like offline to do it. And I'll even put in some dummy requests just to see how it works, and work out whatever kinks. And then we'll.
Yeah, I can send it to you, and you can play around with it to see what you think.
Okay. Samantha, do you have your hand up?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, I have a question, a clarifying question. When Mike, I had kind of written down some of the things that Mike was saying: who, helping manage, other funding sources, project description, funding amount, long-term expenses. And then Erica had said, doesn't meet the final rule. And someone else had suggested, hasn't been requested before. Now, when it comes to the part about doesn't meet the final rule, obviously, I just was wondering how Mike was going to word that. Is he just going to say, like, how have you been impacted by COVID, and how would this help mitigate those financial circumstances that you found yourself in? Because, yeah, I wanted to know that, because I was under the impression that you said, I had thought there was really basically no compliance reporting without any kind of, I'm trying to think of the word I'm looking for, like restricted. We could take the money basically unrestricted as revenue loss. I definitely understand that we want to do it as a one-time thing, and we don't want to take on projects. That was a question that I did have. So that's been answered. But Erica, what did you mean when you said that, like, that we want to put that in there? Does it meet the final rule? Because if we are taking the money as revenue loss, how much reporting back to the state, which then goes to the state and to the federal government, do we really actually need to do? That's
We're going to need, the justification doesn't have to be the same for something we took in revenue loss, like buying Troy a new plow truck, as it does for mitigating COVID-19. That really, you have to answer the question that it fit into that very specific category. And the justification needs to be in writing. I haven't seen the reporting yet, Samantha, so I can't tell you specifically, but we still have to report on it. And it's just going to be a lot less of a description. Maybe we write 25 or 50 words instead of 250 words on justifying a project. So it still has to be done, but I think asking the submitter makes it so that they're a little bit aware of what the dollars are used for. And maybe they're not as well versed in it as we are, or we will be. And so they, you know, their answer in a proposal may be, I don't know. And I would, from my perspective, I would accept that so that then we could talk about it before we just reject it.
Right, and then we help them tweak it.
That's right, and help them, you know, understand that this is just not right for these dollars, or it is, but we may not be able to do it. So it puts a little onus on the requester to understand what the money is they're asking for, just like any other grant someone would go out there for. They'd have to do a little bit of research.
And they have to prove that that's what they spent the funding on.
That's right. And that comes up in the reporting more than the revenue loss side. The revenue loss side is done on the town. And while it's very broad, it's still not everything, but the language is any government service, which is why I say as a norm, we don't give out grants to small businesses. So we know for sure that wouldn't be one of our government services. The revenue loss sounds great because it's a little easier reporting, but there's still plenty of reporting to do.
so when you said for him to write in the application, doesn't meet the final rule, he's not going to write the question, doesn't meet the final rule. He's going to lay out the steps, right? In the application. Like he's going to say, is this COVID to an expense related to COVID?
But everything doesn't have to be related to COVID. That's the.
Well, it doesn't, but I'm saying you asked him to put that in there, but he's not going to put in an application like an agency's going to read when we're the ones interpreting the final rule. That's what I'm saying is what question specifically is that going to be? He's not going to write, does this meet the final rule? And then I was thinking he has the form almost all together that we should probably look at it, you know, it should be distributed to the members of the commission first before it actually gets posted, I would hope. Is that the process we're looking at? Okay.
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
And it sounds like we can move pretty fast because he's already got it.
Except for that part that's meet the final rule. So I was wondering what questions are going to like be in it for that. That's
Maybe just
Mike,
our,
do you have,
maybe that's just our approval item.
So the way that I have it set up is that we are capturing all the information. The reason I talked about reporting is because the way that this works, once we request the information, you know, we can't say, oh, we need something else and then include it in their submission for tracking. Just, I mean, we could enter it manually, but on their end. Then it goes through like a workflow, the way that the application will be considered. So the first step is that the project's submitted for commission consideration. It's then project evaluated by commission for funding criteria compliance. Then the commission would issue a preliminary decision on the request, a potential final decision on the request, and then the project is prepared for commencement, in progress, closeout, and project reporting. That's basically the steps that the project would follow. So we can include links to documents. We can ask them questions about what does this fall under? Does this comply? Or tell us how you think this complies if we want them to do that. But yeah, I don't know that they're going to simply say, does it comply or not? They'll just check yes, because of course they want it. I'm not going to say, no, it doesn't comply. So I would imagine that we would review that as the first step. Does it meet the criteria or not? Yes, no, maybe.
I do understand what you're saying. Yeah. Okay. So we're reviewing for that, but I was wondering if we were going to ask them. I know it doesn't necessarily as revenue loss have to be COVID related, but I was wondering if we were going to ask them any questions about in the WHO, how it be managed, funding sources, description, amount, long-term expenses. I didn't hear anything about how it is related to the pandemic. That's all I'm saying. I didn't know what question was going to the agency was going to be asked. But I don't need to know that this second. I do hope, however, that you send that form out to us first so that we can approve it. I know we don't want to wait 3 weeks to vote on it, but maybe we should. I don't know.
So
That's my thinking.
Suggest that maybe in the header to whatever it is we send out, let's them, some basics language about the rule, a link where they can find the information, and that final determination will be made based on the final rule as far as usage of the funds. So maybe we say that, and then on our end, Samantha, we have to determine how it's going to be used and what rule it will be captured under, because in all actuality, we know sitting here, it does not have to be COVID related for the request to come up. So to ask them to justify how it's related to COVID, we know, excuse me, may or may not happen.
But I do think it would help us prioritize it. And we haven't talked about how we're going to prioritize yet, but I do think that's probably one of the things. So if I'm just thinking, I would love to have just like a sentence or two from each one, just helping me understand that. So I don't know how to ask the question though.
One of the things that I did was I included a question which basically says that they have to indicate the project category. And then I pulled the project categories from the final rule document. So they have to choose one of the following: public health, assistance to households, assistance to small businesses, aid to impacted industries, public employee assistance, capital expenditure, replacement of lost revenue, water and sewer infrastructure, broadband infrastructure, or premium pay. So they're going to have to say which one of those their request falls under. They're going to have to check one of those boxes. I can include additional information with links, or this is what, if you want them to have to read through it to understand, we can totally do that. But if they don't check one of those, it's not going to let it submit.
And what I don't want to do is ask them to do all of this work, write all of these explanations down, and then come sit before us and we just ask them the same questions again. Right. So their work is, they're going to know. What I don't want to do is have us continuously duplicate the work on the part of the submitter, knowing that a lot of times these submissions are going to come from in-house and our staff, and how many forms we want them to fill out so they can sit in front of us and answer the same question that we have in front of us. So, but I think, Samantha, to your point, the most of that is going to be on our end. I see it as how we approve and prioritize. That if it's related to COVID, it might get at the top of the list a little bit faster than something that's just a want. And at some point we may get down to just those kinds of wants, because the larger projects we may not be able to afford.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything to add to what we're talking about here with the form?
Put some of the specific submissions we're talking about on our next agenda to discuss the EDCs, and then that will give them time. They're going to meet tomorrow, and what it is, they'll actually submit something specific to us, their detail. But if we can talk about that project and some of the ones that have come from the CIP plan.
Our goal
yeah.
Would the committee be willing to discuss any of the projects that I submitted?
When is our goal to have these requests in, Mike? Do you have any?
I mean, we can.
I thought we wanted to do this as quick as possible so we could have it for the next meeting. No.
Yeah, so I think to me, the form is sort of the key. Like, I don't know that we should be discussing things without a form in front of us, because we're just going to be right where we are. Then we might as well just do it today. So if everyone's okay with just finishing up this form and getting it out as soon as possible, without coming back to the commission, because we're not going to be able to for another 3 weeks. I don't want to hold up getting some stuff just so we can still work on the form, I guess is what I'm thinking. And if we find that the form is lacking and that we need more information from when we actually go through these, whatever we end up getting, we can add to it. Is that correct, Mike? If we wanted to add another something?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay. So how does everyone feel about that approach? That we just go forward with basically what we have and get it out as soon as possible, and whatever we can look at in 3 weeks, we'll be looking at in 3 weeks. If we get a submission, it ends up on our agenda as something that we might be talking about and acting on.
And like Jenny's proposals, will we take them, they're all individual projects, so they would be individual submissions, and we might take them one at a time. I mean, right. Hers in itself could be a whole meeting as we delve into them. And some of them I think are important that we move faster on than some others. Right. So that's why I'm curious that we know, again, I sit here not just as the first select person, but from the Board of Selectmen, and our board has been very clear, both the previous board and this one, that helping individuals and businesses is at the top of our priority list as far as the immediacy of things, and our emergency response in what way. So I would like to see.
So in that case, like, let's just use Jenny as the guinea pig. So she'll fill out the forms for each of these projects. The ones that she, she'll see Mike's nifty little drop down box. If she clicks, it's to directly help people, or Samantha clicks, it's to directly help the businesses. Then they end up at the top of our agenda in the lineup. Like, that's how we'll decide the order that they're even in.
Thank you. Because I mean, realistically, we can't take on, 15 projects and a healthy discussion in one meeting. Right. We all have many other hats to wear.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. So do you think we need to have a formal vote on this of this is how we're going to proceed? I guess I would like that if anyone wants to make a motion.
I make a motion that we follow the procedure that we discussed here with submissions, and that we approve the form that Mike has created, and we put it on the website and begin to take submissions. Sorry, that's a really long motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second it, Robin Campbell.
All right. Any discussion about it?
No.
Aye.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Anyone against, opposed? Any abstentions? All right, so it passes unanimously. So I guess that's our plan. And that's what we'll be talking about in 3 weeks.
I moved, we adjourn.
Oh, great. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion?
Christina, I just have a question. You have a spreadsheet? You're working on a spreadsheet?
Well, kind of starting to think about one, yeah. All right. All right. All in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Sounds like we're good. See you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.